Hello, everyone, and welcome to the quarterfinals of the StarCityGames.com Players Championship. Kevin Jones with Esper Aggro on your left. Todd Anderson with Green Black Aggro on your right. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan. We are here in the booth as these two great players in the SCG Tour begin things off with a couple of dual lands. For Kevin, he'll play a Port Town now, and he'll play a copy of Smuggler's Copter. Over to Todd we go. He started things off with a Hissing Quagmire. He will now play a Blooming Marsh and his own copy of Smuggler's Copter. One thing you won't find here, thankfully, are any Emrakuls.
I think Jones had the curve here if Anderson played something like Grimflayer on 2 with Reflector Mage plus Gideon coming on the heels of Smuggler's Copter.
Kevin just going to leave up a copy of Spell Queller here. Could have maybe gotten a little bit more aggressive by playing Reflector Mage on an empty board.
Or the Scrounger.
Or the Scrounger as well, and he elected, nope, I'm not going to do that. Maybe a little bit of a surprise there.
I think I would have cast something. First of all, this is not Todd Anderson's first rodeo.
True.
And with Gideon in hand, I'm kind of in the market for trying to get a little bit ahead on the battlefield here. And Jones doesn't even have land number 4 rolled up. Maybe you can play a little bit passively if you were worried about flooding out.
Here's Liliana. That's going to be get hit by Spell Queller. We'll see how this ends up playing out, however. Jones will draw a card. Picked up a copy of Gideon. He'll use the Spell Queller to turn on the Copter. Attack. Trigger here for Kevin Jones. Picked up a copy of Toolcraft Exemplar. Though, as you mentioned, missing the 4th land at this stage. Jones will discard the Scrounger. Anderson will fall down to 17. And Jones will simply pass the turn back again with Spell Queller at the ready. Anderson will draw. Picked up a Forest. He'll play a Grimflayer. Jones with another copy of Spell Queller will take care of that. Anderson has a Swamp. He has a Grasp of Darkness. He will use that to kill the Spell Queller, which means he will get back the Grimflayer. The Grimflayer will turn on the Copter, and now in comes Anderson with 3/3 Flyer. Draw and discard now for Todd. He'll lose a Forest. And now it's 17 up as we head back over to Kevin Jones. He'll untap those 3 lands and those 2 permanents. And draw a card. Declaration Stone was the draw. Reflector Mage, however, is the play. And now Jones will draw and discard a copy of Gideon because he has too many of them and no 4th land just yet. But I like the start here for Kevin.
Yep. I mean, this is sort of the recipe here is get ahead on the battlefield and make it very hard for your opponent to catch up. And if the game kind of slows down a little bit, go to Gideon and try to win the game that way instead.
A Forest here for Anderson will allow him to play Catacomb Sifter. That'll bring along an Eldrazi Scion. See what the follow-up is here in just a moment, and it looks like he'll just pass the turn back. Can't cast a Grimflayer, of course, but he does have a Blossoming Defense in hand. To Jones, Toolcraft Exemplar the draw. Discard the Scrounger early. No black mana yet here for Kevin. 4 Concealed Courtyard. That's how he can get back the Scrounger. But on its own, still certainly fine. It's just a 3/2.
And the Toolcraft Exemplars are really dodgy in this spot to keep in hand. Not to say that he has better options at this point, since it puts a lot of pressure on him to keep the Spell Queller in play. If that Spell Queller dies unlocking the Liliana, then those get gunned down for free. I like looting that away.
Anderson's going to fire up his Copter. He would like to block. He'll be allowed to block. And now he'll loot. Time for him to draw and discard. Picked up a Swamp, also has a Forest in hand. Grimflayer and a Blossoming Defense that Kevin doesn't know about. Do remember these players have access to each other's deck lists, so they do know about the contents. And there's the exchange. Anderson will get to scry because of the Catacomb Sifter that's on the battlefield. And as soon as the scrying is finished off, I'm curious to see what else will happen on Kevin's turn. Obviously, this card that Anderson has found must matter a little bit. He's going to put it to the bottom for now. Toolcraft Exemplar, Port Town, and a whole bunch of Gideons over there for Kevin Jones. Can't forget about the Declaration in Stone as well as we head over to Anderson. He thought a long time about that scry. He'll draw a brand new card. I believe Traverse.
With 4 in the grave, 3 in the graveyard.
Now, how does Todd want to move forward is the question.
Has to be concerned at all times with Gideon, obviously, especially with Jones missing that land drop for as long as he has. Discarded a Gideon. Reasonable to expect that he has at least one more copy in hand.
There's a Grimflayer. There's a Swamp. And here's a match update. Joe the Set, with those electrostatic pummelers, wins game number 1 over Andrew Jessup. If the results are coming in from Joe, they're going to be quick.
Yes.
That's for sure. If we don't hear anything, that means the game has gone long, and that's not a good thing for him. Gideon Ally Zendikar is here for Kevin Jones. It's a Knight Ally. And we might have a little bit of an attack here.
Can't imagine he's planning on blocking, and Anderson can't block, so
Spell Queller will come across.
there you have it.
Remember that Toolcraft exemplar right now, just a little one. No artifacts out there. So we head back over to Anderson. Traverse, Blossoming Defense. And we'll figure out what that mystery card is. Grasp of Darkness. See how that changes things.
So Anderson really holding on to this Traverse because obviously you would prefer to do that with Delirium enabled. But he can use that as his Delirium enabler and get the Grimflayer up to a 4/4. Plus with Grasp and Blossoming Defense in hand, a reasonable chance combat goes pretty bad.
Well, this probably works too. Grasp is going to take care of Spell Queller. That means Anderson gets his Liliana back. You talked about Liliana's ability to just pick off the Toolcraft exemplar. That's certainly in play now.
There's also the opportunity here, if Todd wants to search for minus the Liliana in the hopes of achieving Delirium. It looks like he's going to take the more conservative approach here.
Just search for a basic forest.
And now this Grimflayer is prepared to pressure the Gideon as well.
4/4 Trampler and the Blossoming Defense in hand. So this is a pretty good spot here for Anderson, given the Delirium that he's now achieved, and the Liliana that he hasn't even used yet. Funny with how this format is shaped up, sometimes you forget Liliana's hanging out in this format. A very, very powerful Planeswalker.
Great enabler for the Delirium decks. De-emphasized a bit in the more aggressive build. I believe Anderson with 1 in the main and 1 in the board. Same list as Brad Nelson.
Anderson will take care of the Toolcraft Exemplar, and now some creatures will be attacking. We will find out soon enough where they're going to go, but looks like they're all going towards Gideon. Anderson putting a premium, getting that off the battlefield, and it does make a lot of sense.
Oh no!
There's your double block here from Jones, maybe. Feels a touch risky to me.
Definitely. I mean, it depends how much Kevin feels like he has to protect this Gideon. He could just take the L on Gideon and, put 2/3 in front of 2/3 and 2/2 in front of 1/1, but going for broke here.
Yes, he is. And he's going to lose it all now, will Kevin Jones. So a rough go of it there for Jones on that turn, and now it just seems almost impossible for him to come back.
And this deck does not play well from behind. I mean, you are looking at basically Archangel Avacyn as your way of playing catch-up from spots like this. And as mentioned before, Jones, 0 copies in the main and only 2 in the board.
Declaration in Stone will take care of the Grimflayer for good. And now it's a Scrap Heap Scrounger. Anderson will use a moment to sacrifice a clue to draw a card. Looks like he picked up a copy of Smuggler's Copter. And now he'll draw for his turn. Something like a Virtuous Gearhawk puts this game away all by itself, though. Anderson will take a look at the graveyard here, perhaps wants to get an idea of what he can do with Liliana. No, again, remember, he already has achieved Delirium. Instant artifact, creature, and land in the graveyard.
And the Scrounger can't block, so, I mean, if he wants to keep going about his business here, he can plus the Liliana, you know, cast the stuff in his hand, attack for some damage. Doesn't have to get too fancy here.
Hiss and Quagmire are going to get fired up. Beat downs here from Anderson. He's going to attack for 4. Follow up, the Copter. Going to leave the Eldrazi Scion back on defense as well to protect, it appears, the Liliana. Or also crew the Copter as we head over to Jones. Jones picks up a copy of Stasis Snare to go along with the Plains and the Gideon.
That Scrounger only attacking for 1 right now.
Not so good.
And not blocking, so
So just kind of hanging out.
hanging out.
Is what you're saying.
Looking around, sort of aimlessly.
Yeah, shoulder shrug, beatdown. Go after Liliana for 1.
Remember, players have access to deck list here, so Anderson can be pretty confident that this is Stasis Snare.
Yeah, the other thing, too, is the Scrounger also had -1 as well, so it's a 1 toughness creature. So that's a trade that Todd, I imagine, is very happy to make.
Definitely.
There's Gideon. Knight Ally, pass turn back. Can Anderson finish off the Gideon this turn as he draws a card? I believe Gnarlwood Dryad was the draw. Yes.
I mean, even if he doesn't finish off the Gideon, what are the 2/2s worth on this battlefield?
Not a lot. Liliana might be going up here in just a moment. Now it is. Anderson looks like he might be firing up the Quagmire too. Crew the Copter. Get in there with the Quagmire, the Catacomb Sifter, and the Copter. Draw and discard to the Copter. And no real great blocks here for Kevin.
Take the L.
Yep. Yeah. Let the Gideon just go. Anderson will pass the turn back. Follow up now is a Copter here for Kevin. Stasis Snare at the ready. Has the mana to cast it. Obviously things not looking good here for Kevin, but he is playing on something. There is a string of draws that do exist that can get him back into this, but it is notable what you did mention. The lack of Archangel Avacyn makes things very difficult.
Yep, that's your way of brawling back, particularly against just 3 power threats. Being able to swallow up 1, get a good presence on the battlefield, threatening the flip. I mean, these all play in.
Liliana went up, targeting the Knight Ally. In response, Kevin says, I'll activate my Copter while I still can. So the 3/3 vehicle is crewed and ready to block, if possible.
Also, Jones's deck is going to struggle with a Liliana emblem.
Yes.
On spots like this.
Yes. Here's Virtuous Gearhawk. Going to struggle with that card too.
I mean, that's not really fair. That's a tough card for a lot of people.
One of Standard's most underplayed cards at this stage. It's gonna run rampant over Standard soon enough. I'm a huge fan of that card.
The numbers are really good on this thing.
Yeah. I think you'd like to say it has a good rate.
Very good rate.
Yes. Todd going to spread some counters around. 3 on the Catacomb Sifter. Looks like 1 on the Gnarlwood Dryad. That'll make the Dryad into a 4/4. Catacomb Sifter a little bit larger than that. Now the Gearhawk will turn on the Copter, and it's time for beatdowns. Anderson will get the opportunity to loot here in just a moment, I think. Maybe not. Kevin Jones says, you don't get to attack just yet because I have this Stasis Snare. So, take that Copter down, thank you. And now Anderson will attack with these very large creatures. and Kevin Smuggler's Copter not really all that equipped to block them. Anderson went just left with a Forest in hand. We can't ignore the Hissing Quagmire in his lands as well, and I think this might be Kevin's last draw step of this particular game. For now, he'll play a Thraben Inspector. I take it back. He'll sacrifice a clue and get another draw step. And now we're all set. As Todd Anderson's going to win game number 1 here over Kevin Jones. Green-black aggro. Very quickly up a game here over Esper aggro.
Looked like for a while there, Jones was able to kind of do his thing of staying on the front foot, but once those spell Quellers started to collapse, he didn't have a large enough battlefield to maintain a Gideon, and at that point his deck nowhere near as powerful as Todd's.
Well, I think the best way to sum it up is if Gideon's on time.
Right.
The story might be much different.
Oh, if he has Gideon on 4 with that curve, Smuggler's Copter, Spell Queller, Reflector Mage Gideon, but he had to wait a little bit too long, and by that point Anderson got a little bit ahead on the battlefield, and Gideon wasn't worth a whole lot.
Well, now we turn our attention to the sideboards here for both players, and we are going to start with Kevin Jones, who has 3 Selfless Spirit, 2 Fragmentize, a Ceremonious Rejection and Essence Flux, a Negate, 2 Spell Shrivel, 2 Archangel Avacyn, 2 Gisela the Broken Blade, and a Declaration in Stone.
I like the Declaration in Stone, the Gisellas, and the Archangel Avacyns. I think he wants to just be a slightly bigger deck, a slightly better on the battlefield sort of deck, and those cards help a lot.
On the other side of things here for Todd Anderson, 2 Fleetwheel Cruisers, an Arlwood Dryad, a Deadweight, 3 Natural State, 2 Sky Sovereign Council Flagship, Liliana the Last Hope, a Flaying Tendrils, and 4 Transgress the Mind.
It's possible with Jones presumably bringing in Gisela and Archangel Avacyn that Todd will want at least some copies of Transgress the Mind. But I think the real prize in this matchup is Sky Sovereign. Not a card that Jones answers all that easily, and a card that can dominate the battlefield all by itself.
I was actually going to go towards the boat as well. I think it's actually in a pretty good spot here in this matchup. Expensive, to be sure.
Yes. But again, you want to go to 5 or greater. You want to be outside of Spell Queller range. Also happens to come into play and kill a Spell Queller, which has the potential to unlock a nice threat or a Planeswalker. And I think it's a pretty big cost for Jones to have cards like Negate or Spell Shrivel in his deck to fight Sky Sovereign. So it seems like a great piece in the matchup.
Well, those are the options there for both players. And we'll begin game number 2 here in just a moment. But while we wait, we will talk about the StarCityGames.com YouTube page, where we've got over 100,000 subscribers. So we want to thank each and every single one of you who have subscribed. We got a lot of cool stuff going on over there that Patrick will explain right now.
Well, you can subscribe today at youtube.com/StarCityGames. Archives for all sorts of video series there, including Split Second, Versus Series, Commander Versus, Magic Online playtesting, Best of SCG Live, and much more. Again, you can subscribe today for free over at youtube.com/StarCityGames. Join over 100,000 subscribers and get notified when new content is uploaded to the page.
We got some cool stuff coming down the old pipeline, as Patrick likes to say, for you over on that YouTube page. So keep your eyes peeled over there. And thank you once again for being a subscriber, one of over 100,000 subscribers over on that YouTube page. Todd Anderson, someone you can find on the YouTube page as well, in multiple ways. One way is, of course, the Versus Series archives. Another, the archives of our opens, because we see him quite a bit over there with 30 open top 8s and 6 open wins, 3 invitational top 8s, with 1 invitational win many years ago back in Atlanta. Qualified for this tournament, last one in as a season 3 points leader, thanks to Jacob Ball. We can put an asterisk next to that. Got him in, though. That's all that matters, and he's making the most of it here. Could actually end up seeing Ball in the finals if things keep going that way. A record on the SCG Tour this year, very, very nice. His Legacy deck, Sneak and Show, one he's very familiar with. His Modern deck, he was certainly uneasy with Death Shadows aggro, but he did test his good friend and testing partner, Brad Nelson, and he made it through well enough with that deck to be here in standard with green-black aggro. Knocked Tom Ross out of the tournament. Now he's trying to take care of somebody else who's very skilled here in Kevin Jones.
I'm trying to validate some of the playtesting work that he and Brad Nelson did, as Brad eliminated in the last round.
Todd looking to improve on that runner-up finish last year, too. Now, him and Jim Davis pretty good friends, especially after meeting in the finals of the Players' Championship last year. But Todd, much like Jim and much like everybody else in this tournament, very, very competitive. He really wanted to win that thing. Felt like he had pretty good matchups across the board last year in the finals, but just wasn't able to get the job done.
Yep, Jim pulled off, I believe, if you just look decks versus decks, pulled off a bit of an upset in the finals last year.
So we'll see if Anderson's able to head back that way. Currently up a game. He wins the next game or one of the next 2. He'll send himself to the semifinals, be one of the final 4 people left in this tournament. And we know who the opponent will be for either Todd or Kevin. It's going to be Joe Lissette, who with that Teamer Energy aggro deck. For all you Emrakul haters out there, maybe we found the answer, because the results came in fast and furious. And we know that he dismantled Andrew Jessup very quickly with those electrostatic pummelers and bristling hydras. So congratulations to Joe Lissette, not just a legacy player anymore, but as we've been covering on the SCG Tour for a handful of years, we've learned that quite a bit.
Yes, he has quite a few standard open wins, I believe more than legacy at this point by quite a bit. I would say modern, probably the blind spot of the three formats for Joe. Very well versed in legacy, a lot of standard success. Mostly seems to be shrugging his shoulders and playing Tron in modern.
His Tron deck here this week, and again, you can find all the deck lists over at our coverage page, StarCityGames.com. Green-black Tron this week, and the black almost solely for Collective Brutality. Joe, a card he finds to be very, very powerful in modern, which I think is an accurate assessment of the card.
Well, Tron doesn't interact very well in the second turn, generally speaking, and has historically a very soft matchup against Burn, and Collective Brutality is a solution to both of those problems.
Well, for Team Metagame Gurus, 3 of them made the Players' Championship. Jim Davis, of course, the captain and defending champion. Andrew Jessup, who was sitting behind his teammate Kevin Jones. 2 of them are out, 1 is left. And they could all be vanquished here if Kevin cannot defeat Todd Anderson. No matter what happens, it's been a great year for that team.
Yes. Especially on the heels of this whole thing almost not really happening with Captain Jim Davis considering retirement towards the end of last year, but winning this event last year and then kind of galvanizing the troops, and a great run for this team this year.
It's interesting, too, because Peter Ingram almost certainly would have qualified for this tournament, too, had he not taken the job at Wizards of the Coast, given where he was at in Season 2. But he bowed out of that race, and we wish him, of course, all the best out there in Renton, Washington. For now, we turn our attention back to this one. Kevin Jones will be on the play as these players take a look at their 7 cards. Jones very comfortable playing a deck like this, though he is down a game at the moment. And both players will keep. It's Port Town. Hissing Quagmire here for Anderson. Both players starting off with dual lands. Concealed Courtyard here for Jones. And we head back over to Todd. Todd with a swamp. He'll pass the turn back. Concealed Courtyard here for Kevin. And he will simply pass the turn back. Anderson will draw. Not a lot going on for either player, but this is advantage Kevin, in my opinion.
Definitely. Now with Archangel Avacyn in his deck and also access to uncontested Gideon, the clearer the battlefield for Kevin, the better.
You love Gideon in a spot like this. That is for sure, as Anderson will untap. We'll see if he can actually handle this Planeswalker.
Curious what hand Anderson kept here, because he did keep 7.
He's not doing all that much. Look, it looks like he has like a natural state, a grasp of darkness, and just lands, perhaps. There's an Evolving Wilds. He'll pass the turn back. Maybe 2 natural states.
Yeah, very reactive hand that is not well set up to handle Gideon.
Well, found a target.
Boom.
Scrappy. Scrappy Dappy.
Hit the showers. That's dead.
Yeah. Kevin says, you know what? I'm just going to get in here with Gideon. Get you for 7. That'll work out just fine. There's an island. Jones with, I believe, both copies of Archangel Avacyn in hand, so he's happy to just pass the turn back over to Anderson, who will sacrifice the Evolving Wilds. Jones also with a Reflector Mage in hand as well, but this is exactly the kind of game his deck wants to play. He's ahead, and it's very hard for Todd to come back.
And Jones is so well set up for a short game here with 2 copies of Archangel Avacyn plus Reflector Mage that I like just dialing up the Gideon and attacking.
Servant of the Conduit with the draw there for Anderson. That'll be the play. 2 energy on the way, assuming it resolves. And I can't imagine Kevin has much interest in countering this, even if he could. For Anderson, the follow-up is a swamp and simply pass the turn back. Here's Archangel Avacyn. Trigger on the stack. We'll see a Grasp of Darkness take care of that. And now Kevin will untap. And he will draw. He picked up an island. Again, the black splash in this deck, generally free. They don't really go to sideboard cards, do these Esper aggro players that are black, simply because they only do have 4 concealed Courtyard, as Jones will fire up the Gideons, come in with the Knight Ally as well.
Yeah, I think the philosophy here is that Scrap Heat Scrounger, kind of good enough to play on its own, just as for its size and because of Toolcraft Exemplar. If you happen to draw a concealed Courtyard, cool, but they're not really resting on having black mana to justify the card. That thing's dead.
Yeah. Natural State will take care of the Scrounger.
That's dead.
Ah, it was a Gisela, not another Archangel Evison. That is probably worse for Todd. Todd will show a hand of all lands, Natural State, and concede the game. So, Kevin Jones, Todd Anderson, Esper aggro, green-black aggro, getting ready for game number 3. They've both been... game 1, yeah, I was going to say they've both been lopsided, but game 1 had some interaction back and forth.
Yeah. I think you could... I mean, obviously Jones had to wait a little bit longer than he would have liked to on the Gideon, but definitely a back and forth there. But Anderson there, I think, kept a very reactive hand on the draw. Didn't draw anything early to play, and in those kind of games, Gideon's going to be a walk away.
Kevin, going to take a moment, and we can do the same. We'll take a look at Kevin's sideboard here, along with Todd's as well, yet again, get an idea of what these players are working with. Todd being on the play here, you like the Sky Sovereign no matter what. I imagine you like it even more on the play, but how do you feel about the natural states that have come in?
Well, I guess the big cards you're trying to answer there are Smuggler's Copter. The fact that Jones doesn't have a lot of ways to loot, and that he doesn't have that much black mana, means that bringing in as an answer to Scrapheap Scrounger is justifiable, even though you typically wouldn't want to use removal spells to answer that card. That said, on the play, I'm probably looking to be a lot more aggressive. I think those cards are pretty dodgy to begin with. When we did the sideboarding during game number 2, in between games 1 and 2, it's not a card that I mentioned. I didn't think it was a card Anderson was going to bring in, but on the play, I would be much more inclined to remove them.
For Kevin, he's on the draw here, so he's going to be on the back foot, you have to imagine, a little bit. You still like these big angels, though?
Yeah, I think the game's a lot about brawling, and Jones also just needs some more raw power in the deck, too. And I think the Angels serve that role pretty well.
Well, we get ready here for game number 3 in just a moment as Kevin Jones taking a moment to gather himself for his most important game of the tournament. Same can be said for Todd Anderson. So when he does come back, they'll shuffle up. They'll get ready to rock and roll. In the meantime, we here at Star City Games have a very big tournament to kick off 2017, and that, of course, is Grand Prix Louisville. Legacy will be the name of the game. Got a lot of sweet playmats, sweet cosplayers, and a lot going on. So we'll let you guys learn a little bit more about that tournament right now.
On January 6th through the 8th, make plans to be part of Magic the Gathering history when StarCityGames.com proudly presents Grand Prix Louisville. Play in the Legacy format main event to compete for thousands of dollars in prizes and a spot on the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour. Select the 3-day Infinite Challenge package to compete in all challenge events for one low price, while also walking away with the exclusive Lotus Petal playmat. All Friday challenges are also Grand Prix trials. Come out early and compete for buys in the main event and more chances to claim a Lotus Petal playmat. Prefer 100-card formats? Register for the Ultimate Commander package to play in 4 Commander on-demand events and take home a Commander Versus playmat and Ultimate Guard Commander deck case. And don't forget to come say hello to Grand Prix Louisville's many special guests, including cosplayer Christine Sprinkle and an artist alley full of fan favorites, headlined by guest of honor Rob Alexander. Be part of Magic the Gathering history. Register for Grand Prix Louisville today.
StarCityGames.com/GP Louisville. Find out more information about what's going to be a pretty awesome tournament to kick off 2017. Going to dial up the old Gristle brands. That's where I'm at right now. Though, you know what? Jeff Hoagland this weekend did play a Learn, and me and that card have quite a history.
You do have quite a history for viewers at home that don't know this. There was a Legacy Grand Prix in Columbus, I think in 2010 or 2011.
Oh, yeah.
Where suddenly the very hot deck to play in that tournament was Alurin.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just, someone said Alurin's really good and it got some momentum. I played against both Dave Williams and Todd Anderson in that Grand Prix.
That's
playing
on me.
Alurin.
That's on me.
And I was making fun of this phenomenon in the broadcast several years later, and Cedric revealed that it was in fact him who was playing a lot of Alurin online and got people on board with playing this deck.
I was back when Magic Online had premier events, PEs as they were called. Back if you won a PE, it was a pretty big deal. I had won 2 PEs in a row with Alurin and Legacy.
Todd Anderson still might remember the phrase from that Grand Prix, Searing Blaze with Landfall, targeting you and your birds of paradise, trigger my Kiln Fiend.
That's what you did to him. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
That sounds nice. Now, if this wasn't already readily apparent at that Grand Prix, I did not win a single match. And most people who play the deck did not win a single match. But the times, they are changing.
Yep.
Or they might just be the same.
Well, having an Imperial Recruiter effect in white has got to be an improvement for the deck.
Probably.
Because playing red was always kind of a little bit of a strain.
Look, it's not a hard sell for me to go back to Allure. I love that card, and I liked that deck a lot.
I'm going to guess at this point that you probably don't have the requisite reps to play a deck with that many triggers. I think you're better served just reanimating a Gristlebrand.
Okay, first of all, I don't have the requisite reps to play any deck right now.
That's fair.
So that excuse is just off the table. So now it's just, how am I going to have the most fun at the tournament?
Okay.
I have considered Belcher.
I think you would love playing Belcher.
Don't need a lot of reps for that. It's just if I still remember how to mulligan with the deck, and I love to mulligan already. So don't need a lot of reps with that. Could go back to reanimating Gristlebrand, which is always one of my favorite things to do, or could get really grimy with the old Learn deck.
Yeah.
Right, because that deck, you're in the trenches. You have Cabal Therapy in your deck. A lot of misses coming there.
Yeah, I saw. I did see Jeff Hoagland earlier in the tournament. He had 2 Cabal Therapies in his graveyard, and he was contemplating whether or not he wanted to flash them back against Caleb Shearer. Didn't have much information about his hand. But his whole clock was the 2 creatures in play. But the 2 creatures were an unkicked Arctic Merfolk and a Cavern Harpy.
Nice.
So it wasn't much of a clock. And it was I could see the wheel spinning in Jeff's head about, what play do I need to make here? And it was one of the saddest scenes of the Players' Championship.
Well, I might be on board with the old Alluring strategy.
Okay.
I might be. No guarantees. Like, I'm never going to play a Delver deck. That's not happening.
I'm not here to,
Yeah, you are. Whatever you're going to say next, yeah, you are.
Fire Blast guy is not here to criticize someone else's deck selection. You do whatever makes you feel good.
Okay.
I'm always going to get behind that. But I think if I had to predict, you would have more fun in Tomb reanimating.
More fun than Belcher?
Maybe not.
Kaboom, baby. Kevin Jones mulls the 6. He'll scry to the top, and we'll be underway here for Game 3 in just a moment.
I would play Belcher, but I don't have an Alpha Taiga, so I can't play the deck.
If that's a prerequisite, I'll get you one.
Okay. I watched Ari's versus videos a while. I got the operation down. The trick is to land grant last.
True.
Did not think of that.
That is true.
Then it doesn't have a cost, so you have no hand.
That's
they
correct.
already know.
Yep.
It's,
And then either they have it or they don't.
Yeah. And often they do not.
That's correct.
Because Force of Will is pricey.
Yeah. Smuggler's Copters here for both players.
People, for whatever reason, just love Mother of Runes. Who knows?
A Swamp, and it's a Catacomb Sifter here for Anderson. Eldrazi Scion on the way. Here comes Copter to play. Todd will draw. Discard, picked up a Swamp, discard a Forest, and 3 damage to come across. Jones will fall down to 17. We'll go back over to Kevin. Black mana not an issue this game. Spellcoil with a draw here.
Great looking hand here for Anderson here with a natural state. Great against the Smuggler's Copter, of course. Some lands and a Sky Sovereign.
Reflector Mage.
Reflector Mage.
That has come down to bounce Catacomb Sifter. As far as I'm concerned, we're never going to cover a tournament where Reflector Mage isn't doing something for you.
Oh, yeah. I just love the spiky raw rate blue cards. I just can't get enough of. Remand.
Anderson drew a Swamp for the turn. Also has a Forest in hand. He'll play a Swamp. He'll activate his Smuggler's Copter. He'll sacrifice. What do we have here?
Oh, no!
That is, that your thing is dead now.
Oh, no!
And here's a beatdown.
Kevin!
The boat's here.
I have been at times critical of Sky Sovereign. I got a lot of hype during previous season. I didn't really buy it as a constructed player, but this kind of matchup ahead of schedule, it is going to be as good as advertised.
Well, if Todd is discarding Natural State, he's not too worried about that Copter. That's for sure. Jeez.
That thing's just dead, so.
Here's Concealed Courtyard, and Kevin's going to slow
See,
down.
the problem is with the vehicles, you can make a good beep beep sound. That's pretty good for Smuggler's Copter. But I can't make a good barge sound. And I
can.
feel like that's all right. Go ahead.
Well, I normally just say thump,
No.
but
That is good.
there you go.
That was good.
That's not hard at all. That's Sky Sovereign's noise. That's not hard.
All right, get that noise queued up. Gonna need it.
I'm going to make my money right now for this show. Barge noises. Here's a forest. Catacomb Sifter. There's a Spell Queller. Nope. I think Todd has a grasp. Yep. Get this back. You ready? I don't know. Is Kevin going to crude? Yep, that's dead. Yeah, I don't know if I would have crewed that.
You want to let that one go.
Yeah. And now Kevin's going to take 6. He's in some. He just doesn't have a good answer to Sky Sovereign.
See, very, very sharp that he discarded the natural state.
Yeah, did not need it. Did not need it this game.
Best of both worlds.
Reflector Mage.
Yeah, Kevin's deck just can't play against this card.
It's really tough.
This card plus a battlefield, forget about it.
Yeah.
Planeswalkers are no good. Avacyn's no good. All the smaller creatures are no good.
Kevin will pass the turn back.
All right, I'm going to try. Because that Reflector Mage is about to die.
Chances are. And Declaration Stone's going to take care of that. Todd might... no reason to sacrifice. Just get your clue.
Yep. All right, hold on.
I'm not going to say anything outside of what's happening in the match, which is what I always do. Here's a Virtuous Gear Hulk. Trigger for Todd. 4 counters there. That's going to do it. Todd Anderson is going to win this match here over Kevin Jones. 2-1. Green-black aggro going to take care of Esper aggro. And we have been critical of Sky Sovereign in the past, but in certain matchups, as you just saw, it can be the best card in the entire game.
Oh, definitely. I mean, in this kind of matchup with Jones trying to play creatures not because their stats are particularly good for their mana cost, but because of their utility, their effect on the battlefield, their ability to protect planeswalkers, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very well-positioned card for those kind of matchups.